I think we have Andy in the live stream here with me. Andy, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great, Andy. Thanks so much for being here with me on the Rehab Power Hour.
Glad to be here. My wife, Pam, had an ischemic stroke 5 years ago in November. And so it really should be her name there, but we're here to listen and also have some questions.
Sure. Well, Andy, my main goal, as I said before we jumped on here, is to be helpful and be a resource for you guys. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And if I don't know the answer to something, I will find someone who does. Or I'll be the first one to tell you that maybe we don't know the answer in terms of, unfortunately, science does have its limits, and I may not be able to give you an adequate answer if the information is not out there. But happy to dive right in and help out any way I can. If you wouldn't mind, maybe just tell me a little bit more about you guys and maybe your wife's recovery so far.
Well, she's a retired school principal. She had a stroke back in November of 2016, and she was able to swallow within a few days. We went to an inpatient rehab for a couple of weeks, and she has impairment on her right side. She is now walking with a walker and doing better. The big fear there is falling, and we've only had a couple of minor incidents there. But her right arm and hand have not responded as well as her right leg and foot have. So we've got the machine. She did have a fall a few weeks back, and we had to suspend use of it for a while. We've been out of town for a couple of weeks, and she's back on it here for the last couple of days. She cannot raise and lower her hand from her wrist, so she has no ability to help the machine, and I think it's picked up on that and beginning to move her. And the question is, she can grip to a certain extent the walker, and although her hand can become loose on that, so she's got some grip. She can grip my fingers. I can feel it, but she can't move her hand. Well, I guess the question would be, if she's using the robotic machine, how do you change the quality of the movement?
Beautiful, lovely question. How do we do this? I think it's an exceptionally important one. And the way we do this is we have to be very cognizant of how we're engaging with it. And so, like I was saying, I could just slap the Motus hand on me right now, and it could be doing movements for me off the side of the screen that you would never know, and I would be none the wiser. So what has to happen is we have to effectively try to tailor the environment such that there is very little distraction, so we can actually be engaged with those motions. So what I mean by this is, let me give you another example really quickly. So I'm a big coffee drinker. I love coffee. You guys know this by now. If I'm trying to go out and reach with my right hand to pick up this cup of coffee, I have to first make a sort of a postulation. I have to generate a pattern in my brain that will then coordinate my right upper extremity to then go reach out and grab this cup of coffee like this, okay? That requires a lot of network activation to do this. And then I have to go execute it and then see the consequences of that feedback. Now, what has to happen with a neurologic injury is we have to relearn the sequence of those events. We have to relearn to generate those networks again, effectively. And the way we do this is we just practice it. And so how do we learn when something's good and something's bad? We have the biofeedback, and that's what's a learning phenomenon. And so let's say, for instance, I was learning to pick this cup of coffee up, and it was my very first time doing this. Say, for instance, I did a really poor job and I've recruited a bunch of neurons that didn't do the right thing. I could potentially knock that cup of coffee over. That knocking the cup of coffee over is a very powerful learning stimulus for me to know, hey, let's not do that again. That's a bad thing to do because I just lost my cup of coffee. So what you have to do is you have to go through this iterative process of figuring out which type of recruitment of the neuron is positive and which is negative. And we want to stabilize those patterns that are more positive, more indicative of good movement patterns. And that is the importance of the biofeedback. And so whenever you're playing activities on the Motus hand and it's moving you through motions, that biofeedback is telling you the positive cues. It's telling you exactly where you need to move and how to do it, because it's going to basically, your movements are digitized. And so how do we insert some exceptional quality in and above that? Well, what we can do to ensure that we are being actively engaged in these activities is we can quiet the environment down, remove all the distractions so we can attend to that task and that task alone. I will often tell people to have, if they have a care partner that's present, that's great, but let's not have any music, let's not have any TV, let's not do crossword puzzles, let's not have anything in the background. We need to focus on that and focus on that alone. And then in addition to that, what we need to do is we can also use both of our hands. This is an interesting sort of situation where she's got the Motus hand on her right hand. What I want her to do is to simultaneously do the motions with her left hand. And what this will help do is it will help, by nature, you can see me here, I'm a gesticulator, and we're all kind of gesticulators here, meaning we use our hands to communicate. We do these things manually, both hands, that is. What you can do is you can use her left hand to help sort of mirror those tasks. So whenever it's asking her to move up into extension, go up with both hands, go up with that left hand. And that's going to help that side of the brain start to remember, okay, this is a type of network that I'm going to recruit. And it's also going to give her a sort of model the sensory feedback, right? Because the sensations are really important for supporting and refining motor patterns as well. And so using both hands can really force us to be engaged in a task, not simply that you're kind of just along for the ride. So I'd say those are some of the keys to really making sure we not only get the reps, but the other side of that equation is we also have to have the quality too.
So mimicking the movement of the right hand with her left hand that's not impaired would help make those connections.
Precisely. Yes. And there's actually a lot of really nice evidence on this, on the sort of efficacy, the effectiveness of doing bimanual tasks. Really a lot of nice evidence. And it's the same concept of mirror therapy. The problem with mirror therapy is that it actually is just sort of tricking your brain into thinking that one's moving versus another because you're using optics to change that. In our case, we're actually doing the motions with the Motus hand on. So it's actually physically doing the motions with you. And then on your left side, you're actually going to go up the same. And so you're going to be sort of doing mirror therapy, but it's kind of supercharged because you're also physically doing the motions. It's not an optical illusion.